perfect and pairing to exist. So I asked 7 Mosaicans, well, 8 technically, because I invited Kirsten and Steve to work on it together, each to offer about 2 minutes on how a particular principle has resonated for them, both personally in their lives here at Mosaic. I've asked Carrie to begin by holding up our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person.
The inherent dignity and worth of every person, that it is self-evident that everyone is important and worthy of respect. This principle should be easy to illustrate and discuss. I could begin by reciting a litany of heroes and martyrs throughout human history, and we have had plenty of them, and my assertions of inherent worth and dignity could be made with little or no controversy. Everyone loves heroes, and it is easy to find merit in any or all of them. I could even limit myself to Unitarian Universalist heroes and martyrs. Michael Servetus, murdered by the state in the middle of the 16th century for his religious beliefs. Norbert Chapek, murdered by the Nazis at Dachau during World War II for his religious beliefs. Or more recently, James Reeb, a Unitarian Universalist minister, murdered by virulent racists during our civil rights struggle. But that is not the path I choose to take this morning. I can invoke the names and faces of victims of injustice and oppression, and those who have suffered and continue to suffer throughout the world and in our own backyard of Central Florida. It is to the great shame of humanity that the ranks of those who suffer are legion, and it would take only a modest recounting of their suffering and their associated worth and dignity to reduce all of us to tears. But that is not the path I choose to take either. No, I will choose another path this morning. True acceptance of the first principle of Unitarian Universalism, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, is perhaps the greatest single challenge that we face as Unitarian Universalists. It is easy to honor the martyrs and the heroes, and is a simple matter to evoke sympathy and pity for the victims of injustice, and well-deserved in all cases. But I will call other names this morning, only a very few from a long and sad list. James Holmes, responsible for the murder of 12 people and the wounding of several others in the movie theater in Colorado last year. Adam Lanza, responsible for the death of 28 people, including himself, at Sandy Hook. And the 2 young brothers from Chechnya, responsible for several murders and the injuring and maiming of dozens of others in and around the Boston Marathon, all of whom were total strangers to them. What of the inherent worth and dignity of these every persons? Do we, must we, recognize their inherent worth and dignity as well as the heroes and the martyrs and the victims? Each one of these murderers also had loved ones, people who cared about them, lives, hopes, dreams of a future, and in each case something went terribly, horribly, tragically wrong. Those dreams turned to ashes, and decisions to undertake evil actions were given birth. Make no mistake, I make no excuses for them. And they were each in turn responsible for horrors and suffering beyond imagining. But I do mourn for them as I mourn for their victim. Because their lives, those responsible, also carried inherent worth and dignity, and now all is lost. And what tears may be shed for them serve only to broaden the river of tears shed for the victims of their hateful acts. What horrible waste, what unspeakable loss. Now, there are many places in America this morning where the expression of such raw and counterintuitive sentiments as these would result in anger or calls for my expulsion or worse. But not here, not at Mosaic, because this is a safe place. Everyone is welcome here, and everyone is entitled to and encouraged in the freedoms of their beliefs. And that is why I keep coming back.
carried. Next, I've asked Fred to hold up the second principle, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
Seven years ago, minus 2 months, I saw a story in the Orlando Sentinel about this new church that had formed and was meeting Sundays in the school classroom in DeBerry. The more I read about this group and their approach to faith, the more interesting it sounded. Take a look at this, I said, handing Julie the paper. It might be worth checking out. Little do we know what a change that would bring to our lives. Julie had never gotten over the sadness of the loss of her son, and I wasn't all that far behind. It had been a depressing several years. But that Sunday, coincidentally Father's Day, we approached the door to the classroom, albeit with a little apprehension. Unnecessary as it turned out, because we were greeted by Judy and by Mary Smithwick with the warmth and enthusiasm you would think would be reserved for family or close friends. I was just thinking that if you've never been not hugged and felt like you were hugged, this was the time. We never looked back. From the very beginning, Mosaic felt like home. It gave me a feeling of kinship I had not known in years. For Julie, the fit was perfect. It gave her an outlet for the enthusiasm, creativeness, and intellect that she had kept bottled up for too long. By the time the service was over and we had adjourned for fellowship at the Mosaic office suite, Julie and I both felt like we had found our spot. And when we lost her a year and a half ago, the warmth and compassion shown by you all helped me through some tough times. For that, I am eternally grateful. The UU's second covenant, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, means so much when you see it practiced so smoothly and so epically as you see it through Mosaic. And for that, I am eternally grateful.
Thank you, Fred. I've asked Judy to hold up the third principle, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations.
I've been a Unitarian Universalist for over 30 years. In my mid-20s, I realized I wasn't a Christian anymore, at least in the traditional Trinitarian sense of the word. I needed a faith tradition that would allow me the most latitude in my search to satisfy my desire for spiritual growth. I've belonged to 3 Unitarian Universalist congregations, including Mosaic, since 1982. Of these congregations, Mosaic has been more inclusive than the other 2 when it comes to acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. At Mosaic, there is a concerted effort to design worship services that include a variety of spiritual perspectives. In its worship services, Mosaic seeks balance. It strives to give folks the opportunity to feel what seems right for them, as well as to entertain things to think about. The opportunity to engage in small group ministry also helps us to grow spiritually, bond with others, and enjoy the freedom of the search. Acceptance and encouragement happens frequently in Mosaic's covenant groups, small group ministry. Right now we have one that meets at 2 o'clock in the afternoons twice a month on Thursdays. These are places, covenant groups are places where deep listening happens and respectful relationships grow. When I joined my second UU congregation, covenant groups had just made the scene. To my knowledge, the first and much larger congregation that I belonged to did not have covenant groups. Interest groups maybe, but not covenant groups, where really deep listening is the thing to be practiced. I felt at home immediately in my first Unitarian Universalist churches. I am a UU through and through. But I am profoundly grateful for all that Mosaic offers to me and for being able to contribute to what Mosaic offers to everyone, especially acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth. My name is Judy Raymond, and I'm a founding member of Mosaic UU congregation. Happy to be a card-carrying member since 2006.
Thanks, Judy. I've asked Rob to hold up our fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Now we need to conduct a free and responsible search for Rob. He doesn't appear to have joined us this morning, and so I will express my profound hope that everything is okay and that we will see him next Sunday. And we will skip on it to Liz. I've asked Liz to hold up the fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large. Since she's the president of your congregation, it seemed appropriate to assign this one to her.
I became a member in 2008, and understanding this was a very small group, I knew that I would be expected to serve in many ways, as all of you do. I didn't think I would become president of the Board of Trustees, though, at least for 10 years. So I found myself in this position as one of our members, Alyssa, moved to Rhode Island, near her daughter. When I became president, I made it a conscious vow to try to be a model of good Unitarian behavior according to our own covenants and the 7 principles. It has been, for me, a wonderful opportunity for a pathway to my own spiritual growth. It gave me the opportunity to apply the 7 principles and our covenants in a small group setting, where I could be conscious of any failures to live by any of those tenets. As a member of the board serving as president, it was not my job, but our job to make decisions. I had to remind myself to keep in focus that an important part of my job as president of the board was to listen and think about everyone's ideas and thoughts, and that decisions would be made by consensus. Having decisions made by consensus rather than by a majority vote was a revelation in itself. It is much easier to live with things when we have all agreed that we can give on this point and we don't have to have it our way or my way. We have it. Our decisions would have been based upon what we truly believe is best for the congregation. Put in this context, no one person takes the blame or the credit for the board's success or failure in doing its designated assignments. Serving Mosaic has been one of the most important endeavors in my life in terms of spiritual growth. The results of this endeavor have been very gratifying. Leading with these principles and covenants as my guideline gave me the confidence in the decisions that have been made by the board. It was a great way of bonding with others and creating a positive energy, which I hope went out to the congregation, making the work of the board rewarding and, yes, fun. I thank Mosaic for the opportunity to do this.
Thanks, Liz. I've asked Susan to hold up the 6th principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all.
Good morning. I'm Susan Dupree. I'm a founding member of Mosaic. And this is hard because you all are so beautiful. From the very first gathering in 2004 of the group that would eventually become Mosaic, there were intense discussions around the question, what is the purpose of a spiritual community? It was a minefield of emotion, and we didn't really know where to start. Luckily, a path was offered to us by two amazing women, Reverend Susan Smith and Connie Goodbread. They called it the Chrysalis Way, and for nearly 2 years, well, 18 months to 20 months, a group of 10 to 15 future Mosaicans met, studied, argued, and dug deep in ourselves for what was true. For me, the process was life-changing. I considered myself a UU since I was in college, but up till 2004, I had only been an active member of a congregation for 8 years. I knew the UU principles were the goals that UUs embraced and strove to live up to, but they weren't really discussed in the other congregation I belonged to, and I didn't see them applied to everyday congregational life in any intentional way. During the Chrysalis Way gatherings, the UU principles were challenged on a very personal level. They were no longer just words. They formed the basis for the way we dealt with each other right there in the meetings and small groups, in finding our vision and our mission, and even in writing bylaws. It was amazing. These principles work as guides for respectful interpersonal relationships. It was a revelation for me. Principle 6, the affirmation of the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, is only one of the principles that speaks deeply to me, but my dream and of us as a justice-seeking community came alive with that. And in 2005, we formed the social justice team, of which I was appointed as chair and served until last year, looking through the question of what is the purpose of a spiritual community. In the Chrysalis Way, we were led to consider what values would be reflected in a spiritual community. And then we had to narrow it down to only 5, and we chose compassion, service, transformation, individual spirituality, and respectful relationships. That was a huge thing. These values became the basis for our covenant, our vision, our mission, and our bylaws. We wanted to be a large, powerful force for transforming the world, beginning with ourselves and reaching out to the world. With the philosophy of Lao Tzu's, if there's to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there's to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there's to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. If there's to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. So it really is a very personal thing. I found that Mosaic a community of generous, concerned, involved people, taking to heart our mission of transforming lives. In our affirmation of the 6 principles of peace, liberty, and justice for all, promoting it throughout the world. Through our social justice work, which Carrie spoke of earlier, we reflect our values and strive to educate, advocate, and provide service in our community. The work we do together deepens our relationships and builds community, internal and external. This is what moves me. As Marge Piercy writes in her poem, To Be of Use, I want to be with people who submerge in the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who stand in line and haul in their places, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in common rhythm when the food must come in or the fire be put out. And I found those people here in this community, and I look forward to us becoming a large and powerful force for change in our community and in the world.
To wrap us up, I would ask Steve to hold up the 7th principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are part.
My wife Kirsten and I have been living in Orange City for about 12 years now. We don't live far behind the church here, a couple miles, a little less maybe. But over the past few years, we've really been into and very active in bicycling. We've ridden in many charitable events, mostly for kidney care awareness, because at the time the company I was working for was a kidney care company. So I was very active in charitable events for that cause. And over that course of time, we raised thousands of dollars and ridden hundreds, if not 1,000 miles or more. Lately, though, we've shifted gears a little bit. We've toned down our rides, and we're started to settle into a more leisurely enjoyment of bicycling. Often we ride around our own neighborhood, back around University High School behind us here. And when we're feeling overzealous, we trek from our house to Blue Springs and hit the Beardsford Trail. If you're looking for a good workout, that's a good trek to go on down the Beardsford Trail with the hills and everything and back. It is definitely a good workout. Anyway, back in late August or early September of 2012, when Mosaic first moved over to this location, on one of our less adventurous biking days, we decided to ride around our own neighborhood to enjoy the day, get some fresh air, and re-energize. Our ride took us by this church, as it has many times before. Up until this day, there was nothing very special about our route, and the church was just a cut-through along our trip. However, it just happened that on that very day, a banner for Mosaic was being hung. As my wife and I rode by, we looked at the banner and noticed that it was for Mosaic UU. We looked at each other, smiled, and stated how we should check it out. My wife has always had an interest in free religious thought, and the Unitarian Universalist philosophy interested her very much. I must admit, I honestly didn't know much about UU or what principles were upheld by UU. I did know that it was not your normal come-to-Jesus type church, and that's what interested me the most. As does my wife, I too always felt detached to any single religion or creed. I always considered myself to be a spiritual mutt, harboring on or relating to Buddhism philosophies more than Christianity. Later that night, we went on the web and researched what we could about UU and decided this was definitely worth a visit from us. That very next Sunday, we decided to come to Mosaic. As we pulled into the parking lot of the church, we looked around at the various parked cars, reading the various bumper stickers that many have proudly on display, reflecting free thought, religious freedom, and the sorts. Upon entering through the door, we both smiled and knew at that very moment this congregation might match us well. If you stop and think for a moment about how we are all connected to some degree and how the world in which we live is bound by these laws of interconnectedness, you learn to appreciate and understand the relationship we share with all things. We all exist in the same space and time, living in the same area, sharing the same air, the same roads and sidewalks, seeing the same sky, feeling the warmth of the sun and the dampness of the rain, and yet, up until the time Mosaic moved to this very location, my wife and I never really knew of its existence. However, it did and does exist in our own neighborhood web, so in a sense, we have been connected to you and known each of you much longer as we have shared this time and space with you. Since coming to Mosaic, we have felt a warm connection to each of you and to the UU principles that are upheld. On many Sundays, we have been intellectually sparked, thoughtfully provoked, and emotionally moved. Every Sunday, we have learned the importance of camaraderie, the comfort of good conversation, and the power of coffee to bring people together. Mosaic UU has turned out to be a great fit for us at this point in time along our quest. We recognize and appreciate the oneness that we share and the very existence of Mosaic in our neighborhood web. To quote Albert Einstein, "A human being is part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts and feelings, as something separated from the rest. a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures, and the whole of nature in its beauty. Nobody is able to achieve this completely, but the striving for such achievement is in itself a part of the liberation and foundation for inner security. Mosaic has given us the opportunity to free ourselves. So happy 7th birthday, Mosaic, and happy Earth Day, everyone. My name is Stephen Webb. My wife, Kirsten, and I have been a friend of Mosaic since 2012.
Thanks, Steve. The 7 UU principles are not just words. They are powerful convictions, ways of being and behaving that impact all of us every day. They are not always easy to do, but they are always important. And they are what makes us strong yet compassionate, firm yet flexible, and able to distinguish between what is right and what is merely righteous. May our principles, our purpose, and our beloved community be blessed with love and prosperity today and in all the days to come. Happy birthday. We'll sing one last song together. It's called Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky. John will play one time through, and then I would ask that you stand if you are willing and able and sing once again with birthday robustitude.